everyone, and welcome to Heart of the Matter, a broadcast series where people come on and share their stories of survival, inspiring us to live the healthiest life we can. I want to remind everyone that heart disease is the number one killer of women, taking the lives of 1 in 4. And I also want to give some statistics on congenital heart defects. 1 out of every 100 children is born with a congenital heart defect known as CHD. CHD is the world's most common birth defect, affecting 1.35 million infants every year. Roughly 1 to 1.5 million adults in the United States likely have a heart defect. In fact, today some 85 to 90% of children born with a heart defect survive to adulthood. I give you these specific statistics because our guest today is a warrior fighting for awareness about this very thing. I'm so pleased to have as my guest today, Paige Knipfer, and I'm going to be asking her some questions, having her tell her story. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about her. Paige is speaking to us today from Madison, Wisconsin. Paige is a trainer for a financial institution, a CHD warrior, an adoptive mom, wife, mentor, volunteer, and avid traveler. She was born with 2 congenital heart defects and has had 4 open heart surgeries. She's going to tell us about that. So won't you join me welcoming Paige Knipfer. Thanks for being here, Paige. Hi.
Thank you for having me. Hi.
You're
Yeah.
welcome. I'm going to ask you questions after a bit, but I want you to start by telling us your story. Would you do that, please?
Yeah, of course. So as you mentioned, I was born with these heart defects. And unfortunately, at the time, my mother did not know in utero that I would be born with these. I actually almost went home, and thankfully, a nurse said something didn't look right. Oftentimes, the term blue baby, or the skin looks a little blue, or the lips look a little blue, caused some concern to do some additional testing. And that's why oximeter readings are so important for babies now that are born, to kind of check some of those things before they go home. And I was immediately med flighted to another hospital to have open heart surgery pretty quickly. Success rates of, especially with my heart defects, I needed immediate corrective surgery to live past a couple months of age. And so I had a series of 4 open heart surgeries from the age of 1 to 5 to correct my 2 defects. So sometimes, there's a whole wide range of defects, but tetralogy of flow is pretty common in infants. And that's basically where the oxygenated and non-oxygenated blood is mixed in your heart. And there's no separate chambers pumping throughout your body. And obviously that's where the term blue baby comes from. So that was one of the defects that was fixed. Also, I have arteries of the great transposition. And arteries of the great transposition, basically my arteries were in the wrong place. So the surgeries I had done are kind of a little weird. My heart is actually flipped. So my left ventricle is on the right side and my right ventricle is on the left side. And my one part of my heart is pumping for the rest of it because that's how they built it. And they actually used Gore-Tex, which I think is pretty fascinating. So Gore-Tex would be like the material for like a winter coat or gloves. They use that to actually repair my heart. And it's just so amazing how much technology has changed. So I'm 30 years old. The success rate has continued to only increase as those statistics were shared in the beginning. And we're living into adulthood. And so that's also where you kind of see us transition into adult cardiology, because we're living into adulthood. And years prior, that was not the case. So with these new medical advances, it's pretty awesome. I've been very fortunate to not need any other heart surgeries. Like I said, I am 30. I do have yearly checkups though. So that's kind of, my story.
Oh my goodness. I've heard that term my whole life, blue baby, but I really just thought it was something at birth, and they were short of oxygen at birth, and I never really connected it to congenital heart defect. Thank you for explaining that. And so I heard you say you had surgery shortly after birth. Is that correct?
Yep. So I immediately, because I was also born at a St. Mary's, they immediately baptized me because they weren't sure my success of survival. And then I was med flighted to a hospital that could perform surgery. So I went into surgery, I want to say probably a couple weeks after I was born. So it wasn't immediately. And then that was my first surgery. And then, like I said, I had a series. They waited a year. I would heal, and then they would open me back up, and I would have my next surgery to kind of rebuild some of those, basically rebuild walls in my heart with that
Right.
cortex and
Oh,
rewire, right?
oh, oh my goodness. I'm blown away with this. So I want to ask you another question that's not a, that I s- not standard for me. So as a little child, could you run and play and jump? Were you restricted with your playtime?
So that is one thing I will commend my parents for. They never treated me like glass. They always told me I could do whatever I wanted to do. The only limitation I had was like gym class or competitive sports. So I really didn't fully get that until high school, right, when sports become more competitive, because my parents just didn't want me pushing the limits. And that's also even as an adult, your workout routine and things like that. I am a bit more cautious in just pushing things to the limit, which most heart patients are. But yeah, as far as my childhood, I felt like it was fairly normal. I did have obviously the yearly checkups, but that was just something I always grew up with, right? It was my normal. So often when I hear other women, heart women who had diagnoses later on in life or had a heart attack or things like that, I feel like that'd be extremely difficult because you lived your life the way you knew it and then completely changed. Whereas mine, this has always been my reality, good and bad, right? um,
Right.
Definitely a different experience, right? As a heart disease warrior.
That's amazing. And I have talked to enough congenital heart disease warriors to know that it's difficult for them to relate to someone like me who had a clogged artery and a heart attack and had to have stents. And it disrupted my whole life, and I'm bitter and angry about it. And they've lived their whole life with this. So let me ask you about emotions. Um, do you ever have them related to your diagnosis, or how would you answer that question?
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, I think with everyone, you have moments in your life where you feel bitter, robbed, feel like life isn't fair, and why can't I just be normal? I definitely have those moments when, I do have a scar, right? So anyone, if I'm ever out in public, especially that was one thing I guess as a kid, I was very self-conscious of my scar. And I learned as I got, more into adulthood to be proud of that. But as a kid, I was very ashamed of that
Mm,
and hid it to no extent if I could. So yeah, I have moments where I feel that. One thing I did want to bring up in this piece is I was told I should not have children. And I think that was a really, really emotional time for me. I was devastated. So there's a lot of risk with pregnancy and heart defects. There's a lot of unknowns too, as I kind of mentioned in the beginning, right? We're living into adulthood now, which is great, but there's just not enough data or research on it. And as we all know about pregnancy, there's a lot more blood flow, there's a lot more oxygen needed. And there's a statistically chance of 10% of my future child having a heart issue as well. And so my husband and I decided to not pursue a biological child for those reasons. But when I had that conversation, I want to say I was probably 17 the first time a cardiologist told me that. And then when I did really finally start getting into family planning around, I think I was probably like 22, I was really devastated to hear that. And that took me some time to kind of to work through. And that's really where, at that moment in life, that I was like, this is not fair. I just, like I said, just want to be normal.
Right. I can imagine, but I do know that you're also a warrior for adoptive moms and help other families in this journey. So you've turned your not fair into a real beautiful family.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so another question that I ask is about lifestyle changes people make after they have a heart issue or realize that they have to change their lifestyles. Do you do anything particular in that regard?
That's a good question. So I've been really fortunate to not have to make any drastic changes in my lifestyle. I will say two things about this, though. I feel like I live life a lot differently than my peers. Because of my heart defect, I feel, as cheesy as that sounds, I am so grateful for each day. And I realize how fragile life is and how much is needed to have everything in your body work correctly. And so I feel like lived things differently. So I did a service project when I was in college in Guatemala. And then in college, I signed up for a semester at sea. So I lived at sea for 4 months and traveled to 14 countries. I don't think I would have ever done that had I not had my heart defect, because I was very much, and I still am, of seize the moment and do things that you want to in your life. And I also think that's why my husband and I, and in my life, I have hit lifetime milestones much sooner than my peers. So I got married at 22. We adopted our first child at 25. Like, we bought a house. I feel like we've hit all these milestones, and I'm just 30 now. And I really do attribute that to my heart defect of, like I said, just life is so short, and I want to live it to the fullest, and I want to do whatever it is I want to do. And so I think that's definitely something. I also think with COVID too, I also am a lot different than my peers. My peers are young and healthy for the most part. And so I have been much more restrictive in following social distancing and working from home than I feel like my peers, just again, because of my heart defect.
Sure. I I appreciate you saying that because you're right. That's something that you have that some of us who've had heart issues later in life won't experience. I mean, we do say, "Well, I'm going to change my life and I'm going to live a new normal," and you start doing that. It's 50 or 60 or 70, but you got to do that early on, and maybe it's a blessing. Good for you.
Yeah.
Okay, next question. I always ask, what did you learn about yourself after your diagnosis? And once again, you've had this your whole life. Do you feel like you've learned anything in particular about you in your life in your 30 years?
Yeah, I think just kind of alluding to everything that we've talked about, like, I really believe that me being born with this has made me who I am today. It really does impact a lot of decisions in my life, whether I consciously know it or not. Like I said, the traveling that I've done and the milestones that I've hit in my life, I feel like are directly impacted by that, and the way I view the world. And like I said, being grateful for everything. It's a constant reminder that life is way too short. And my yearly checkups are that as well, right? So even if I try to pretend I don't have a heart defect for the majority of my year, right, I definitely have those yearly checkups that are a reminder that I
Right.
am not invincible.
Right. Okay. Good answer. Last question. What advice would you give women about heart disease?
Yeah, so I really wanted to relate this to congenital heart defects. So oftentimes we have kids who transition into adult cardiology, and as I mentioned, it's kind of been this weird transition because some of us are now just getting in and making it to adulthood. But oftentimes, statistically speaking, kids in their youth stop doing their checkups with their cardiologist and into adulthood. I don't know if it's around that college age or what it is that stops them. And I get it, right? As I mentioned, my yearly checkup is my reminder that I am not invincible. It makes me feel very fragile. It's not an enjoyable experience. However, I view it as I would much rather, and maybe it's now too because I'm a mom, but even before I was a mom, I'd much rather them catch something at the beginning until instead of waiting until it's worse and it's become such a problem that there's more drastic measures that are needed or that I'm feeling extreme symptoms. So oftentimes with congenital heart defects, there's a couple issues, leaks that can develop. There are medical and surgery treatments that are potentially needed. The other thing that we see is potential organ damage. So particularly with my surgeries, and oftentimes children who have had multiple open heart surgeries can develop liver damage issues from scar tissue. So they're checking my heart and my liver as I get older. And so those are things that, like I said, if I could have people walk away from something, is how important those checkups are. Like again, I know they're not enjoyable, but I think catching these leaks early on is only going to help you live a longer, happier, healthier life. And oftentimes, like I said, we try to avoid it, and you can only avoid it for so long. So I statistically, like I said, it's so sad to me how many stop doing these checkups into adulthood. It's so important.
Thank you for saying that, because I believe that people that watch this, they either know someone or they might meet someone and they can pass that along.
Yeah.
So Paige, I'm so pleased that you could be here today and share your story and give us all your insights. And I'm going to sign off for now. I forgot to say who I am. I'm Susan Smith, your host, and I just am always so impressed. And your way of handling this and turning it into a blessing in your life is very impressive to me, inspires me so much. So I'm going to say goodbye to the audience. If you hang on there, Paige, I'll be talking to you in just a minute.
Okay.
And so to everyone, thanks for coming in, and talk to you next time. Bye.